Hello, and welcome to our NRF broadcast on the cognitive retailer, smart retail planning. I'm your host today. My name is Vito Labate, and I have the pleasure of being joined by two of Capgemini's retail experts. Lindsay Maza and Joyce Chu are with me today, and they will share insights with us on some of the most complex challenges that they are solving for Capgemini's clients today. These are challenges resulting from the new reality that retailers around the world are dealing with. During our conversation, we'll hear how retailers can leverage data, analytics, and artificial intelligence to deliver shopping experiences that consumers are looking for both today and in the future. So Lindsay, Joyce, thank you for being with us today. I appreciate it. Can you maybe just take a moment and please introduce yourselves? Lindsay, maybe you first, please.
Thanks, Vito. Hello, everyone. I'm Lindsay Maza. I'm joining you today from sunny South Florida, but I've been serving North American and global retail clients all over the world for the last 17 years. I specialize in innovative retail supply chains and retail merchandising operations, and I've supported 12 of the world's largest grocery clients, as well as many fashion apparel, specialty personal care brands in North America and globally. Today at Capgemini, I lead our global consumer products and retail domains team, and I'm very happy to join the NRF Big Ideas presentations to share with you our smart retail planner and what retailers can be doing in this space.
Very good. Happy to have you with us, Lindsay. Thank you. And Joyce, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joyce Chu. I'm joining you all here from Toronto today. My background is actually a mix of both industry and consulting experience. I've worked in a variety of retail segments, including fashion apparel, specialty stores, big box, general merchandise, as well as grocery retailers. And my specialties lie in the merchandise planning and demand planning space. So really excited to be here today.
Very good. Thank you, Joyce. So let's start. Let's jump in. I want to set the scene first, maybe for our audience. Clearly, the ways in which retailers are reaching consumers has shifted, from the pre-pandemic era to today. And we've seen a rapid acceleration of the adoption of essentially new ways to shop. Lindsay, starting with you, maybe you could describe this new landscape for us and with a view towards some of the flexible supply chains that you've seen amongst retailers today.
Well, 2020 was a year. So I think we've lived through and are living through one of the largest global events, global crises of our lifetime. And we keep hearing about what it takes not only to survive, but to thrive in this new normal, in a time where we're experiencing just massive shifts in consumer demand, an escalation to online buying like we've never experienced before, challenges getting limited availability inventory to the locations where consumers are shopping for it, along with pressures to continuously reduce costs in our supply chain and elsewhere in our business. And if your household's anything like mine, you're balancing all these changes at work with, working remotely and perhaps virtual school and changes in routine. But the neat part about it is I think that's really pushing boundaries. It's giving us this opportunity to fully break the paradigms and previous boundaries that we've experienced before and bring new ideas into our companies, take shots we may not have been prompted into otherwise. So what's interesting about the new supply chain is really viewing it as a supply network with the availability to meet consumers whenever, wherever, and however they're shopping. So bringing the customer back into the center, providing the products that they need and want at a moment's notice with almost instant gratification. That's the new retail supply network.
And so building on that, Lindsay, do you see, coming out of all this, do you see any key, underlying drivers or factors that really characterize a modern smart planning approach to supply chain? Has any of that emerged in your view?
I do. And I guess to broaden the definition, Vito, when we think about supply chain, we're often thinking about delivery, getting boxes outside our door, whether that's transportation management or warehouse management. But I'm going to ask our NRF audience today to expand the definition of what they think of as the traditional supply chain. So in this new world, we're finding that retailers are really figuring out how to expand that definition and the corresponding metrics to get there, all the way back to the merchant processes. And we're excelling at meeting the consumers when, where, and how they shop when we get the inventory in their hands quickly. So we're going to share innovations today in using data to make different decisions than we've made before in merchandise planning, in assortment planning, in demand forecasting, and then of course in transportation, specifically thinking about that last mile and the costs associated with that. But expanding that definition to include the metrics of margin, revenue, and inventory at the same time, all the way back up in the life cycle to the merchant process and the assortment planning process, merchandise financial process. Those are where we're really looking at major changes and getting to touchless planning and getting to better demand forecasts in order to achieve the consumer objectives today.
Interesting times. And I heard you talk about assortment. I mean, we know from our work with our clients that assortment is a big factor on the minds of most retailers today. Lindsay, maybe you can comment a little on the importance of data in those assortment decisions that retailers are having to make now on a daily basis.
I mean, we can't do it without data. We are right now as retailers, our goal is predicting consumer propensity to buy based on the driving attribute that causes a customer to buy a specific item. And that is at a specific date and point in time in a specific method of purchase. So knowing what lines to invest in, creating financial forecasts and open to buys, tailoring and localizing assortment decisions, making them space aware at the right store or distribution center for quick delivery is where we're headed in terms of retail planning. And using cognitive computing and the data that we're able to mine, we can spend more time evaluating those driving attributes, whether they are from structured or unstructured data, instead of trying to figure out what the attribute is. So no longer using a static attribute, but using dynamic driving attributes from cognitive computing will allow us to jump over some of those lagging areas and change the curve of how we can predict what retailers can sell to consumers at any given point.
Right. Well, Joyce, I want to bring you into the discussion because I'm curious about demand forecasting. We've heard about this, and clearly demand forecasting forms an essential component of the modern supply chain process. But how can retailers actually forecast demand more accurately, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Vito, and something that we hear from our clients a lot. Historically, when we've been forecasting products with demand, sales history is really one of our biggest drivers for that. Sometimes we add in elements of promotions or sometimes even some components of weather. But really what we're seeing and hearing a lot from our clients is, especially in a year that we just had, your history isn't really going to be actually true to what you believe is going to happen in the future. And even how do we combine new things that are happening? How do we react faster to some of the changes that we're seeing in the marketplace? Things like, how you shop online, whether it's through Facebook, you can shop through Instagram, you can follow your influencers and do the social commerce experience. That's really fundamentally changing the demand patterns that we're used to seeing. So a lot of what we want to do is be able to bring in more connections to help you make better decisions in a more agile manner so that there's a little bit more of that touchless demand forecast that Lindsay was alluding to, so that we have that near real-time data that we can react and make smarter and better decisions within unstructured and structured data.
I guess it also makes me think, Joyce, about the idea of machine learning and artificial intelligence. It's part of our lives in general now, not just in this industry. But how does machine learning and artificial intelligence, are you seeing that enhancing the flexibility of supply chains and kind of better serving that fulfillment arm that a lot of retailers are responsible for?
Yeah, again, a really great question and something that we talk to our clients with on a regular basis. I think the true value in bringing in all this data and analytics with the machine learning and artificial intelligence is really being able to bring it across our entire network of planning. It's not just in an area. We know some retailers are starting to explore different areas of analytics, but no one's really doing it from a full end-to-end picture, which is really where we see the value. So things like, how do I have, from a replenishment standpoint, how can I automate some of the really repetitive tasks? When I think of, a seasonal fashion line, as I'm getting towards the end of my season, it's really manual to decide how do I allocate my products to which stores and where am I gambling that it's going to go sell out? But we can automate some of these processes. We can look at the selling cycles. We can make better decisions if we can automate those repetitive tasks to, repurpose some of that time for more value-added tasks, for more replenishment or allocators. We can also take a look at, further downstream in the process, how can we use robotics to help in our warehousing to make, again, more efficiencies that we're seeing to really be able to meet that real-time demand more efficiently and quicker and adapt to that change so that we can capitalize on the opportunities while minimizing risk.
Okay, so good baseline for us, but I guess I want to transition us now a little bit to talk about the end of the road, the end point, the end consumer. And we hear a lot about the term hyperlocal. It's kind of a term that is on a lot of people's minds these days, especially. Lindsay, what do we mean by the term hyperlocal? And can you maybe explain also, how does it help get products to consumers at the end of the line?
Well, hyperlocal just means you're operating your business as close to the population density as possible. It can mean, using a store to fulfill or operating a dark store specifically for a neighborhood or sourcing local products to fulfill those consumers. The reason that this is very valuable is not only from a business perspective in being able to get to consumers faster, but also from a sensitivity perspective of the consumer themselves. So a lot of people's personal ethos is tied up in, creating jobs in my own community, creating industry in my own community, buying from someone I know, buying in a local environment. And so hyperlocality really helps service that experience of the consumer's personal ethos. But then for a retailer, it also brings that important aspect of bringing the product within a 1 to 2 hour delivery window of their consumer instead of having to ship for days. We have seen a giant increase in the amount of expectations consumers have around getting the product to them in near immediacy. So kind of this instant gratification model where we're looking at bringing products as close to the consumer as we can. That way, we're reducing the cost in the last mile, which is, as every retailer here knows, one of the most expensive costs in a typical supply network.
So within that last mile, within that fulfillment, there's this idea of micro-fulfillment. So what do we mean when we say micro-fulfillment, and how does that actually serve both the customer and support the retailer who's getting their products to the customer?
We're seeing a ton of retailers move to this micro-fulfillment right now. I think thinking small is the next big thing, and we're going to see a lot of that as 2021 progresses. What we've seen so far is that micro-fulfillment centers are really allowing retailers to leverage existing stores in order to increase online order fulfillment. So we've seen this giant spike in e-commerce, and frankly, 2020 was the impetus for this with COVID and safety concerns. But I think that this has been a storm that's been brewing. We can all say in retail, from 2016, 17, 18, 19 being like the tipping point for consumers really doing this giant migration to online. And then COVID turning us over the edge where we moved into not just the traditionally things bought online, but into the grocery space as well. So when we look at this micro-fulfillment being used from existing stores, it allows us to increase that capacity to deliver online fulfillment effectively and efficiently and enable same-day delivery, 1 hour delivery, 2 hour delivery. And it can be simple. It's not some complex thing. We can get complex with it. We can build automated fulfillment centers, fully robotic fulfillment centers, but we can also transition some of our back room space with 10,000, 20,000 square feet, some as small as 5,000 square feet, combining this hyper-locality with micro-fulfillment. And that's going to help us continue to reduce that last mile cost, really meeting the customer expectation of being there within an hour or two, providing a sustainable supply chain in support of consumers' personal ethos. And, as Joyce brought up before, really reducing the risk in the supply chain by being able to get products to the consumer almost immediately versus facing shipping delays and limited availability further in the supply chain.
Yeah, and I suppose it raises the question around pricing as well. How do you price for that in your strategy as a retailer? How do you choose to employ those as key components to the business? And so, Joyce, it leads me to the question, I guess, how can dynamic or effective pricing be use to improve some of the metrics that we know retailers are trying to fulfill to meet their strategic objectives?
Yeah, for sure. So, retailers and, you guys know, have always employed a variety of pricing strategies that are dependent, obviously, on what you are strategically trying to achieve as a company. Dynamic pricing is just another type of pricing strategy that's really about flexibility. So considering your market needs, there can be a factor of time associated with it. The best example I can think of for using dynamic pricing wisely is really, when we look at the context of minimizing perishable and seasonal waste. And if I look at an example in the grocery space, we know that food waste of perishable items is huge, whether we're looking at, fruits and vegetables, prepared foods, meat, dairy, you name it. There's so much waste that can be associated with our grocery retailers. And, some of the things that we're trying to help our clients explore is this concept of dynamic pricing, which is really being able to take, situations where we know an expiration date is nearing, and trying to reduce prices throughout the day in order to get that and get it moving so that it entices the customer to buy it because they might be cooking that day. And then you are increasing your sales because you're getting rid of that inventory at your stores. You are minimizing your margin impacts because even you don't have to throw everything away. You're just cutting in a little bit into your margins, and you're overall reducing your waste. And I think that's really important. I think being able to use, analytics to help you do that faster, because a lot of stores struggle with it today. What most people do in stores is it's on the store managers to make these decisions. It's really manual, it's cumbersome, and there's no kind of thought behind it. But we can use, data and analytics to really help us make better decisions. So maybe we price down at different points of the day, et cetera. So that's kind of the idea behind it that we can help retailers with.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I know we only have a couple minutes left before we open this up for questions from our audience. It's that time of the year, prediction time, start of a new year, 12 months ahead of us. What are your predictions for the future of the supply chain and order fulfillment? Joyce, let's start with you.
Sure. I think, that scaling e-commerce is going to be a really big one that we're going to continue to see. Meeting the customer, to what Lindsay was alluding to earlier as well, when they want it. How do we get products to the consumers? Whether, are we going to start exploring the use of drones or more autonomous vehicles, crowdsourcing delivery, that whole aspect of, getting the customers what they want when they need it. That's going to continue to be a big thing. I think, consumers, as we continue to see, will continue to prioritize health and safety. I think that's going to continue to be a trend and a topic of importance that we're going to see, as well as, I think consumers, while there is that health and safety, I think sustainability is still really important. That is something that we still need to make sure that we have. So customers will prioritize, expect that they'll pay more for some sustainability things because that's important to their personal ethos. Those are kind of my few predictions.
Very good. Thank you, Joyce. And Lindsay, 12 months ahead of us and beyond, what should we expect in your opinion?
Well, I think that there's a few predictions that I really want everyone to take away from today. And one is that the ecosystem will rule. We are no longer in a view of a traditional supply chain where we, went from distributor to distribution center to store to consumer to buy in the store or deliver to their home. But we're now in a full ecosystem, an intelligent network where we should be thinking about how do we ship consumers' product from anywhere in the network at any given time? How do we use our store footprints as distribution center networks, whether that's through microfulfillment or hyperlocality or dark stores or gig economy, but there's all new methods for getting consumers products. And so it's the full ecosystem that we need to utilize. And then to go along with that, being nimble is the way to win. We have seen in the last year in 2020 that agility was key. Being flexible in our supply chains was a requirement, whether that was shifting the products in the assortment or making sure that we found new distribution channels in order to get them to consumers, or a new way for a consumer to shop, scaling e-commerce, scaling the gig economy delivery models, bringing dark stores or micro-fulfillment into our back room. So that being nimble and being able to handle disruption in all new ways are going to be the future. And the last one I want to leave our NRF audience with today is that the future is digital and human. There's no going away of the art behind picking the products, but the ability to use data and cognitive computing in order to drive the decisions on what attributes will cause a consumer's propensity to buy, or the forecast for the demand in specific locations for those consumers who want to buy, is going to be driven based on new structured and unstructured data. And we're really excited for the next wave and the next opportunity to bring that human component to the supply chain planning cycle and bring data that drives the digitalization of supply chain.
Awesome. I'm so grateful for your time, Lindsay and Joyce. Thank you. Insightful dialogue today. And I also wanted to thank you, our audience members, for your interest and your participation as you listen in. We are happy to stick around for a few questions and connect with you. If you have questions or comments, feel free. In the meantime, thank you for listening. And thank you to Lindsay and Joyce for our interview today.
Thank you, NRF. Thank you, Vito and Joyce.
Thank you.
All right. Well, why don't we take a look and see the kind of questions that are coming in? I can see one right off the bat regarding slides. Yes, the answer is we will be making some of the slides that we shared with you today available. So stay tuned for those. We'll make sure that you have those after our call. I want to address the first question that seems to be coming in. Lindsay, I think this might be for you. It says, since a retailer's decision-making is only as good as the data that they use to make them, how can retailers get better, faster data and insights? Maybe you can address that, Lindsay.
Ooh, a big one, Vito, right off the bat here. Well, the technology is there. I mean, for leaders, data drives insights, it drives hypotheses, it drives experimentation, and of course, it drives value creation. So thinking of revenue improvements, margin improvements, inventory reductions. It can yield improvements in planning, in personalization, in scalability, and of course, in brand experiences. Leaders are using consumer sentiment and trend analysis, and they're using unstructured and also structured data. They're gathering consumer data to help identify the driving attributes and the propensity to buy. And they're doing that through the existing disruptive technology that's available through AI, through cognitive computing, and then they're using that data to drive decisions. But in addition to the technology, it takes, business and organizational change as well. So the business processes need to be adjusted, and sometimes the organizational structure can benefit from an adjustment. We are looking at when you use these decisions to drive things across sales, across marketing, across supply chain, we're really looking at centralizing those category decisions and creating such things as pod accountability for inventory, for margin, for revenue, with merchants, with planners, with supply chain. And that central team can really use analytics on a more structured and global level to arrive at a view based on hard data, rather than basing assortment decisions on something that can be more nebulous. For instance, like individual store owners or managers' opinions about local preferences. So really using, potential pod accountability as a shift in the way the business functions and in the way that we drive decision-making, so that we have shared accountability across the metrics that drive our business and are using the consumer sentiment and trend analysis in order to inform and yield new results in those. We're seeing leaders make changes both in the technologies and in the org structure to support it. And that's how leading retailers are getting better at using this data to inform decisions.
Very good. Thank you, Lindsay. And actually, it's a good segue. There's another question that just came in. Joyce, I think it's for you. It says, you mentioned how data is the fuel that ignites demand forecasting. So the question is also about the future. What do you see the future of how to best ingest and make sense of data? Do you see a time where a data marketplace would serve this need?
Great. That's also a really great question. Thanks, Vito. I think definitely we do see that. I think what we want to bring in is a lot of that unstructured data we talked about, we want to make sure that we bring that in so that we can make better decisions across the board, that we can track the trends that are happening in the marketplace earlier. And the way that we do that is really through, the insight services that we offer. It can be, the way that we organize the data, we can have it centralized and then bringing that into our demand forecast, for example, as another input. And I think that's the short answer. I think there's a lot more that we could dive into that gets way too detailed, but I think the short answer is yes, we should be incorporating that into our future plans.
Great. I'll stay with you, Joyce, because it looks like this next question maybe works with what you were talking about earlier in the talk. As an industry, we talk a lot about lights out or touchless planning across consumer products and retail. How close can we really get, and how should a retailer get started?
Okay, another really great question. So I think that we can get close. I think when we think about the day-to-day of planners and demand forecasters, what they do today, there's so many times that we touch all of our decisions again and again because we're getting new information all the time. I think there's things that are really repetitive that we could definitely make sure that we automate in the process so that we can spend our time focused on more value-added decisions, so that instead of just focusing on what do we need to run the business, we can focus our decisions on growing the business. So when you automate some of those more repetitive tasks, it frees up time for you to focus on more key areas of the business. What we usually tell our clients is that, you can start now. We typically do, as little as 8-week POVs with our clients where we can start using a small subset of data, couple use cases that we draw up with the client, and make sure that we're working together with you to get the results that make sense. I think from there, we can just grow based on the results as we get comfortable with the data. That's when you can continue to expand and scale your operations. But in order to get comfortable, you have to be familiar with the results. You have to feel good about what we're feeding the data and what's coming back so that we can feel good about scaling those decisions before we just completely try and automate everything that we do.
Okay. Very good. I think we have time for maybe one or two more. I see one here. I like this one on sustainability. Lindsay, maybe you can comment. You mentioned sustainability, and that's really important to us as consumers as well as retailers responsible for our planet. What are some of the ways that better planning helps us support sustainability? Lindsay.
I'm so glad that this was asked, Vito. I mean, we're looking at a major shift in world dynamics resulting from what has occurred in the past year in 2020. So, consumers really letting retailers know, and retailers having a responsibility to say safety is critical, not only for the consumer, but for the employees and for the team as well. Convenience has become even more critical as we look at things like home deliveries and click and collect and BIPOC, and really getting that convenience factor. And lastly, and almost most importantly, sustainability has become critical to consumers as our own personal brand ethos has shifted to say things like hyperlocality and microfulfillment, and being good for the planet is something that we think we need as a way to move forward into 2021 and beyond. And we're looking at retailers take that charge and lead consumers in better product selection, better inventory planning, all things that lead to less waste and less products being disposed of, and therefore reducing our carbon footprint. So it's amazing that things that create better margins and create better revenues and will allow us to reduce our inventory, whether that's holding costs or the inventory in specific locations as it is, also lead to a reduced carbon footprint for our planet and a commitment that we as retailers can make to our consumers, the customer that's out there shopping our stores today, to learn and identify how they can support that in the buying patterns that they use, as well as what we're bringing to them so that they can feel proud to shop within our safe, convenient, and sustainably driven stores, as well as our omni-channel presence.
Excellent, everyone. Thank you so much. I know we're coming up against time, so I think we'll pause with questions there. I want to thank all of you, our audience, for listening in, and of course, our speakers. We appreciate the questions and the interactivity. And let me say also in closing, we always appreciate and welcome the opportunity to interact with you, and we'd love to continue the dialogue after today. The best way that you can get in touch with us is via our LinkedIn retail industry page. It's where we regularly publish news from all around the retail industry, from all over the world. Insights, news, all kinds of information you'll want to follow on a daily basis. You can get in touch with us there by going to LinkedIn and searching on Capgemini Retail, and you'll see our industry page and some of the insights we're already sharing publicly now. On behalf of everyone, thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thank you.